अजीज़ तलबा व तलबात, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। ये हमारा कोर्स है इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड थ्योरी एंड पॉलिसी। इसमें आज हम 3 टॉपिक डिस्कस करेंगे: मर्केंटाइलिस्ट व्यू ऑन ट्रेड, लॉ ऑफ एब्सोल्यूट एडवांटेज बाय एडम स्मिथ एंड लॉ ऑफ कंपैरेटिव एडवांटेज बाय डेविड रिकॉर्ड। लर्निंग गोल्स, जैसा कि मैं बता चुका हूँ, इस लेक्चर में हम क्या डिस्कस करेंगे: अंडरस्टैंड द मर्केंटाइलिस्ट व्यू ऑन ट्रेड, understand the law of absolute advantage, and understand the law of comparative advantage. Introduction. Basic questions. What is the basis for trade? What are the gains from trade? And what is the pattern of trade? यहाँ पर लॉ ऑफ कंपैरेटिव एडवांटेज और एब्सोल्यूट एडवांटेज को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए कुछ assumptions रखी गई हैं. Number 1, 2 nations. Number 2, 2 goods in the world. Let's start from the mercantilist view on the trade. Mercantilism क्या है? Mercantilist कौन थे? Basically, in economics, mercantilism is the philosophy in 17th and 18th centuries in England, Spain, France, Portugal, and Netherlands. According to this philosophy, believed that the nation could become rich and powerful only by exporting more than it's imported. Export surplus brought inflow of the gold and silver. Trade policy was to encourage exports and restrict imports. One nation gained only at the expense of other. Mercantilists measure wealth of nation by stock of precious metal is it possessed. In contrast, today we are measured the wealth of nation by its stock of human, man-made and natural resources available for producing goods and services. The greater the stock of resources, the greater the flow of goods and services to satisfy the human, and the higher the standard of living. Trade based on absolute advantage by Adam Smith. The law of absolute advantage proposed by the Adam Smith in his famous book An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of Wealth of Nations in 1776. According to the Adam Smith, trade between two nations is based on the absolute advantage. When one nation is more efficient than or has an absolute advantage over another in the production of one commodity, but is less efficient than or has an absolute disadvantage with respect to the other nation in producing a second commodity, then both nations can gain by each specializing in the production of commodity of its absolute advantage and the exchanging part of its output with the other nation for commodity of its absolute advantage. By this process, resources are utilized in more efficient way and output of both commodities will rise. This increase in the output of both commodities measure the gains from specialization in production available to be divided between two nations through trade. A nation has an absolute advantage over another if it can produce a commodity more efficiently. When one nation has an absolute advantage in production of one commodity, but an absolute disadvantage with respect to the other nation in the second commodity, both nations can gain by specializing in their absolute advantage good and exchange the part of the output for the commodity of its absolute advantage. For example, Canada is efficient is growing wheat. inefficient in growing bananas. Nicaragua is efficient in growing bananas but inefficient in growing wheat. Canada has the absolute advantage in wheat. Nicaragua has the absolute advantage in bananas. Mutually beneficial trade can take place if both countries specialize in their absolute advantage. Take another example like Pakistan and Japan. Pakistan has an absolute advantage in growing wheat and absolute disadvantage in growing computers. On the other hand, Japan has an absolute advantage in manufacturing computers. On the other hand, absolute disadvantage in growing the wheat. What happened? Mutually beneficial trade can take place if both countries specialize in their absolute advantage. Trade based on absolute advantage. Specialization and trade benefit both countries. Adam Smith and other classical economists advocated a policy of the laissez-faire, that is, the minimal government interference in the economic activity. Free trade would cause world resources to be utilized more efficiently, maximizing the word tariff. US produce and specialize in wheat instead of cloth and produce 12 bushels of wheat. On the other hand, UK produce cloth instead of wheat and produce 10 yards of cloth. If US give exchange 6 bushels of wheat in the exchange of 5 yards of cloth, both nations can gain from specializing production and trading. After trading, US has 5, 6 bushel of wheat and 5 yard of cloth, and UK has 6 bushel of wheat and 5 yard of cloth. In this scenario, the trade volume also increases and the efficient resources are efficiently treated. Trade based on the comparative advantage, the law of comparative advantage. David Ricardo proposed this law in his principle of taxation. According to the David Ricardo, even if one nation is less efficient than the other nation in the production of both commodities, there is still a base for mutually beneficial trade. The original idea of the comparative advantage was based on the labor theory of value. The value or the price of commodity depends exclusively on the amount of labor used to produce it. Can use the opportunity cost theory to explain comparative advantage. The opportunity cost of a good is the amount of a second good that must be given up to release just enough resources to produce one additional unit of first good. Simply we can say that the cost of one good in terms of other goods which could have been produced with the same factors of production. Let's we have the numerical example. Two countries, US and UK. producing two goods, wheat and clothes. Uh, US produce 6 bushels of wheat and 4 yard of cloth, and UK produces 1 bushel of wheat and 2 yards of cloth. US has absolute advantage in producing the both commodities, that is wheat and cloth. On the other hand, UK has absolute disadvantage in producing both commodities. UK has absolute disadvantage in both goods since the UK labor is half as productive in cloth but 6 times less productive in wheat compared to the US. The UK has a comparative advantage in cloth. US has to comparative advantage in gains from trade. Both countries can gain from trade. US gains as long as 6 trade from more than 4C. The UK gains as 2C trade for more than 2 wheat. Thus, the range for the mutually beneficial trade is 6W, 4C, and 12C. Thank you.